Hello and welcome to another episode of the CollabTalk Podcast. This show is dedicated to exploring how and why we collaborate, whether one-on-one, within small teams, or across an entire organization. And through conversations with experts, real-world stories, and practical insights, we break down what makes collaboration work or fail and how to improve it. My guest today is David Weiss, founder and CEO of Axiom Industries, and we're talking about I'm excited about this. I've known David for a long time, I think since 2004. But this is really cool stuff that we're going to get into what he's been working on. The title of the session is Your Next Mentor Might Be a Machine. Like, how do you know? It's the what is it? What's the Turing test, or what is it from Blade Runner? Is that what's the test?
Turing test. That's right. That's it.
Yeah. So welcome, David.
Thank you. So glad to be here. So glad to be here.
I always like to first start out by give it kind of a quick extended bio of your history, because I know we met before we worked in the same building a couple years later, but give some of your background.
Well, I started. I grew up in Redmond, Washington, before it was the headquarters of Microsoft, and it was just an old farm community. And Microsoft came. I ended up starting at Microsoft right out of high school, and I worked there for 10 years. It's during that time that we met. The iPhone happened. I went and did my own thing doing iPhone development, kind of rode that wave. Worked in international poverty for a while, and then did a fintech startup, and then here I'm doing another startup, but it's AI focus. Sorry.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. No, I love that too. I'm trying to remember the building that when I joined that you were in, because so David ran at the time, you were down there running the Macintosh business units, servers, like all that stuff that downstairs. So what was it, 115?
Yeah, 115. I'm pretty confident it was 115. I may be remembering things wrong, but it was in that, right there on 148.
For folks that are looking at visiting the Microsoft campus, there's the giant where R&D was, I think still is, Building 99. That wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
So they built that while we were there. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. There were actually, that was that whole era. There was some cool marketing. Microsoft was experimenting. I've got a bunch of when the campaigns were done. They were giving out a small puppet version of you if you won this contest. Do you remember that at all?
I don't remember that, but I'm not surprised.
There's a whole campaign where they had commercials for it and stuff. Anyway, I've got the posters for that, where you have this somebody sitting on a plane talking to their puppet, their little version of themselves, arguing about technology.
Yeah. I'm vaguely remembering this now. Yep.
Yeah. So they did some fun, and then they did weird stuff around the Zune, but that was all that part of that era there. But well, I want to just jump into this. Let's talk about kind of the problem space here. We're so as an entrepreneur, this is something that where I really connected with, talking about well, let's start kind of higher level. Let's back up and say, from your experience, what do you think are the essential leadership skills that are usually missing from, technically adept individuals when they step into these leadership roles, or somebody who has an idea and they're an engineer, they're a developer, they're a builder, a creator, and they have an idea and they get some funding to go start a company, but then they've never done, managed a team, managed people, managed things of this size. What are those skills that you see that are missing the most?
Well, that's a super broad question. You and I both experienced this in spades at Microsoft, where you'd have a lot of technical people at Microsoft, and they were in their own right. There was no technical track for them to progress. The only way you could progress in that era was really to become a manager. And so you take these just brilliant engineers and you put them in a management position where all of a sudden soft skills were really important. The ability to be empathetic, the ability to communicate clearly and manage all kinds of different stakeholders at the same time simultaneously. These kinds of things are just not, humans are just so much more difficult than computers, and in very similar ways.
But it's crazy that especially in tech, so many tech companies that frequently overlook the risk of moving somebody that has none of that experience. Will they even make the right business decisions, or is it purely because of the tech? Why do you think companies do that?
Well, I think there's probably multiple reasons why that happens. I think one is just one of expedience, they're like, well, I know this guy, I can hire someone outside, but I kind of know this person, this individual is trustable, I kind of know them, and they're smart, their intellectual horsepower is high, so you know that should translate to a different domain, but that doesn't always that's not always the case. And so general management, moving someone into general, and many times I remember, at least in the business unit where I was at, a lot of times these devs, because our organization was dev heavy, they didn't want to go into management. They almost felt forced into it by
Yeah.
the way the structure was set up in terms of compensation. And so anyway, I think you want someone who is going into general management who is interested in the business thing. I will just say, as a like, this is a perfect segue into, from my perspective, I'm spending a lot of times, you know, I've had a lot of experience with small business just from a kid. When I was 15, my dad had me help run one of his small businesses, and great experiences there. And it's just been a part of my um, lived experience all my life. And one of the things that you see is that typically when someone starts a small business, they have a few basic motivations. Like, one is they want like financial reward. They think they owning a business can be more profitable than being an employee. They want more time and autonomy and control. They think, I can do a better job than the boss man, and they want more free time in their life. They also want to do something they love and that they're passionate about. Like in the case we were just talking about, sometimes it's technical. They just want to code. I mean, I know a ton of devs who just love to code. Day and night is like their most favorite thing to do. I get that. Like, I've been a developer for 20 years. I totally understand that. But their assumption is that owning a business means more time doing what they enjoy. And this is something that's not really spoken about very often. And there's this idea of recognition and validation. They want to be recognized for their skill and create something that kind of bears their name. And but those are like kind of, what's interesting is that nowhere on that list is a desire to build and run a business, which is kind of which is
Right.
like the core instrument for those outcomes that they desire. So
Right.
almost by definition, the person who starts these small businesses, whether technical or not, I've seen it all over the place. Um, they're not good at running a business. I mean, it's not what they were focused on, at least in the beginning. So what happens? Well, they wanted to make money, and then they have to learn about taxes and government regulation, labor costs and material costs, and they all eat up in the profits, sometimes even to their own paycheck. And then they're like, wait a second, they wanted time and control. I mean, they do get a lot of control in terms of running the business, but then they're having to control things for which they're ill-equipped. And as far as time, they never turn off. When you know how it is as a small business owner, it's like impossible almost to turn off. Whereas when you're working 9 to 5, you just go home and like be done. And
I
and
find
then they
myself
wanted,
explaining that a lot. It's like there's no vacation time. It means that you're not working on a project, you're not billing a
yeah,
client, you're not like doing
yeah,
all those things. So it's almost a greater cost. There's no one's paying you to, be for that time on vacation.
totally. So they wanted, and then on top of that, they wanted to spend time doing more work that they love. But like the administrative side of the business demands more time and attention in ways they didn't anticipate. And they wanted some kind of like social validation, right? But now being the boss of a failing company hardly secures that notoriety. So like
Yeah.
they're like, uh anyway, I just think all of those things come into play where it's like difficult to make that transition. And I see it, you know, whether their craft is something like deeply technical, like coding, like we were talking about, or if it's something, um, it could be as simple as construction or a craft of some sort where they just love art or something like that. It's just very difficult, and it means they have to transition from like building this thing, which is their their passion, their art, to building this other thing, which is its own entity in of itself, which is the business. And if you do that well, that it does give you the freedom of time, money, and purpose that you started in the first place. But like it's just really difficult. And I built Axiom to help solve that problem.
Yeah, and I know that the idea of like, well, how much of this can you learn? I'm sure you have too. I've seen plenty of technical people that like step into that and realize, hey, they're really good at the business side of it too, and they can kind of figure out the balance. In my experience, the majority are not good at the other side of things, and so like long term, they find they learn some skills. Certainly, I think that like you can't go into, even if you're terrible at it initially, you can
Uh-huh.
learn the fundamental skills of being a manager in operations, running a team, doing those things, and then find a place where you can do some of that, but still most of your passions. May not be in the CEO role, or it could be a very dev-centric, hands-on CEO, as long as you backfill the rest of the roles.
Well, I think it's really a fantastic point, Christian, because like that's what's so hard about what's so hard about business is actually not the craft, even as complicated as whatever that thing is. What's so hard about business is you have to you have to execute well in all of these domains at the same time. And it's just really challenging. You have to execute at the strategic level. You have to execute on finance, operations, execution, marketing, strategy, brand, technology, innovation, growth, and sales. You've got to execute on product strategy and development. And then you have people layered on top of that and culture. And then you have legal, risk, and compliance, and your customer experience. Like all of those things, they're easily no, it's just very hard to be the kind of Renaissance individual that's going to execute across all of those really well. And that's why you see this, business mortality rate of 65% business fail after 10 years. It's just really, really difficult. And that's what I think needs to be solved.
Yeah. Well, it's and before we kind of get into that around the topic, I mean, one thing there, I've had many conversations with this, talking with a business partner about the role of mentorship. And so that's something that I learned with my first startup back in the late 1990s was I went out as the CEO of a software startup. Three of us started this company. I went and put together an advisory board, and I was the primary recipient of that advice. I mean, my co-founders, some of that, but mine was like almost daily talking with one of the advisors about different things on the business aspects of it, and so that was something that was very important. So now I've got, close friend, business partner, and she talks about all the time how much she relies on her mentors, and she's constantly mentoring. I'm mentoring several people right now in different roles and levels, but also relying on having these voices to fill in those areas where we are weak. And
it's so important. One of those soft skills that you were asking about at the beginning of this conversation was what one of the ones I would say is like it's definitely in the top 10 is this ability to be self-examining, introspective, and to be like, hey, and look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know what, I kind of not very good at that thing. So I need some support there.
People are not good at that, recognizing that, humbling themselves enough to say that, hey, this is where I'm weak.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a crucial. I remember my first time as CEO, it was like totally reconfigured my brain because I had this idea about I'd been on executive teams, at the executive level, different a whole bunch of different experiences like that. But once you get into that seat where it's like, if this is to be, it's up to me, and it's like all of that weight, and you're managing this, hopefully a team of really skilled executives, it's it changes the way I think for me at least. Maybe everyone else gets that right off the bat, but for me it totally reconfigured. I'm like, okay, I need to be executing across this vast array of different skill sets and aptitudes and areas, and I'm like, I have some depth, let's say, on the technical side, but everything else is breadth. How do you execute in that really well and effectively? And you're absolutely right. Coaching, mentorships, like mastermind groups, like anything you can to help you fill in those gaps. If you're not doing that, like at a baseline, you're just really limiting you're limiting your personal progress, but you're also limiting the potential for positive outcomes because you simply cannot see. And that was built in to the way I was approaching Axiom when it became obvious that the technology could help this way.
Well, what's in getting into that, I mean, I was thinking about this, like fundamentally when you start using a generative AI platform, things like, Chat GPT, even using, Copilot, which is matured in some ways, they've improved on some aspects of it, has it at the core of that. It's different, but playing with different tools that are out there. But when you, as part of the framing of your research, of your question, that your prompt that you're building out, is to say, look, I'm looking for help in this area, as an expert in this. You're like setting up to give that context to the AI to understand like this space, like that. So that's how I structure the question. There's the what's the
Yep.
what do I need the expertise in? What am I looking for an answer in? What knowledge space around that? Who's the audience of this? What is the output that I'm looking for? Kind of all
Yep.
those different things that
Yep.
go into your prompt around that. And I started asking it business questions. And I like, what are your thoughts on this? And I could even point it, refine it. And I actually was playing with this with Copilot because I could go and create like a SharePoint, agent that only looks at my content. I've been using OneNote for writing, for the past 20 years, and I could
Right.
have it look at my external website. I could have it look at all of my OneNote archives, any data in there, and then ask questions. It's almost like it's answering back with the knowledge from my brain that I'm,
Well, this
trying
is the
to answer.
great. I mean, I would just say this is emblematic of kind of like a core leadership principle that I would say in the modern age is that if you as a business leader are not um, creating systems or using systems that extend your, let's say, call it extend your consciousness, maybe that's the wrong way to say it, but like extend your ability to think well and execute against this like vast knowledge base. You've got to do that. You've got to do anything and everything you can because everyone else will be doing that, and you're going to be falling behind if you're only just basically leveraging your unique human attributes, which are fantastic. I mean, I'm a big fan of like make the computers do the things computers are good at, and humans the things humans are good at, and don't cross
Right.
the streams. It's bad,
But
but
that's
but you
that
really have to
fundamental
do that.
idea of like if you think of like a governance body, the why you have the governance body with the stakeholders would be like each division in your company. If you go in there and say like I have an idea for this and we're going to go and do this, and you're like I've thought out all the possible scenarios, so you can't disagree with this kind of thing, and the other part's like yeah, HR person's like did you think about this and this and this
Oh, I
that
mean, that's that multi
operations, right?
totally that multi perspective analysis. I mean, I I kind of the way I thought about it when I was, again, the frame for me was small business entrepreneurs, right? So how do you help an entrepreneur kind of level up from founder to CEO, like make that transition? And the way I thought about it is kind of from the learning sciences perspective, this idea of a zone of proximal development, where you have like this core area where this is the stuff you know, and then outside of that sphere is stuff you don't know. And it probably doesn't look like a sphere, but just like work with me, like there's a kind of atmosphere around the surface area of that globe, and that's where people learn. If you talk to them like above that, it just goes over their head. They can't process it. And if you talk to them about stuff they already know, they're like, "Why are you talking to me? I already know about this." Like, like you got to address them right there. And so that was kind of like the beginning piece of it. So Axiom was focused on helping business owners progress step by step, learn and transform into those kinds of business leaders that can achieve the outcomes they want. But it meant learning like 1,000 new things.
Yeah.
And so pedagogically or andragogically, or technically, the approach I've taken is with Axiom is to build a system where you give entrepreneurs access to this super smart leadership team powered by these AI agents. And like imagine anytime, day or night, you can walk into a conference room and there you find a seasoned chief executive officer for strategy and vision. And then you have a CFO for finance and planning. And then you have a COO for operations. You have a marketing officer for strategy and brand. You have a CTO, a revenue officer for sales and growth, product officer for product development, and a HR officer for people and culture, a chief legal officer. We might call it general counsel, but I decided to just keep with the CXO thing. And then, a customer officer focused on customer experience and success. And so like, and in addition to all of these business areas, which like every business has these, you get your kind of own executive coach, which I named Axiom. Axiom Note was actually one of the first agents I built when I was prototyping to see if I could actually achieve the kind of quality where, anyway, that's where the whole name of the thing came from. So that's what I was trying to, build. And like, if you can go in there and then immediately talk to this group, and they can help you immediately with the like real and pressing needs of the business. I felt like I could hit that zone of proximal development, optimize learning outcomes and aggressively help the individual grow through that process so that they can learn how to run a business. And so that's kind of like the genesis story of this whole thing.
Yeah, for folks too, since we're not demoing here for this, and some people are listening, while some others have the visuals, but yeah,
Sure.
it's so like the interface for it, I'll tell you, like we were walking through this last week, looking at it, and it essentially just looks like any other Gen AI, interface for it. It's a
Hmm.
little more formatted, but the idea is like if you're familiar with that format, like going into Chat GPT and saying like I just said, building a prompt saying, hey, I've got this scenario, here's my audience, so I've got this customer, I'm running into this situation, this might potentially be a legal issue, I'm not sure around that, but I'm not, what's the right approach for this kind of thing. And then how does Axiom respond to something like that where it's cross-disciplinary across a couple different areas, but what does then the response look like? How did you provide that in your solution?
Well, it was a little bit tricky because most of these LLMs have been um, the base models, let's say, have been built with the idea of a one-on-one conversation, and I was actually trying to create a multiple conversation. I was trying to create all of these different, because a business is a dynamic system that has all these different parts and pieces. You pull on the thread here, it affects 7 other areas over there, and you pull over there. So it's a really dynamic system. And so how Axiom responds is dependent on the question, actually. But at a rudimentary level, what happens is that all of those agents are in the discussion, all 11 of them, the 10 representing the 10 functions, and then the executive coach, and they do analysis and decide, am I the person to respond to this? Do I have something meaningful to add to improve this discussion? And they're all coming at it from their own vantage point, right? They all have expertise in their specialization. And so immediately they queue up, and you'll start seeing one person respond, and then the next person responds, and the next person respond, and they build off of each other. They're all aware of the shared conversation. So it looks like a group chat or a Slack discussion, or like however you experience. There's so many different. It's fairly straightforward to understand, but what's really interesting is how they riff off of each other, and what that so what I've learned is that, like, at a high level, these LLMs were trained on human data, and so each of these members of the leadership team has names, personalities, pictures. Because what I've learned is that if you treat these LLMs like people, they perform better. So I do these kinds of things to encourage people to treat them that way. I gave them, initially I had them titled managers, but I changed the CXO title, C-suite titles, because I'm trying to help the entrepreneur make that lift, and I think that helps them kind of pull the entrepreneur through this transformative journey of like thinking more high level. And
Yeah,
I think anyway, so
that's like the
I would
basic of
say
how it
was
is. Well, and to again to kind of expand, like from my perspective, like look at this. So like in that question where it was primarily maybe I wanted an answer from the CEO, that from that bot. But because it was maybe the primary issue first that needed to be answered was legal, you might have the chief legal officer bot actually answer first, say, well, from a legal standpoint, you need to make sure this is done, this step. And then right next in the conversation, then the CEO might come in and then say, once you've done that, here's what I'm looking at from my perspective. Here's how I would approach this. And then
yeah,
you might then
yeah,
have then the marketing officer or the customer success bot like say, well, and here's the piece to add on to that. And so it is very much like you're having a conversation with a trusted set of advisors. But what's interesting too is when you got in and talked about that added complexity of they are independent, so it's not just Chat GPT pretending to be each of these different roles, that they're finely tuned around their expertise. They could be built off of a different model entirely,
yeah, yeah,
leveraging different back end, AI model that is better, more performant. Another Microsoft made up word, by the way, performant.
performant. I love that word,
Could be,
of course.
I know, I love that one too, but could be performant to that area. So the CFO is probably going to be a different back end, a new, different AI that's better at those kinds of calculations, the financial data, than the marketing side.
It's a great point. I mean, honestly, a question I get all the time. as I'm meeting with business leaders. They're like, hey, I use AI every day with ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, Gemini, Grok, whatever. Why should I use Axiom instead? And I like my answer is you shouldn't. Like Axiom wasn't built to replace these frontier models. Axiom, what Axiom is built for is to help you learn how to run your business successfully. So keep using ChatGPT, keep using Copilot, whatever. I encourage that. They're great models. I still use them depending on the task. But where things, here's how I'd say that why like Axiom is better or gives you better results. The first thing is is what you kind of mentioned, Christian, which is this idea about specialization versus generalization. I mean, there are plenty of people who believe fervently that one of the frontier labs, OpenAI, Grok, Google, Meta, they're going to come up with a single mega model that's going to be able to outperform every other model in every way all the time. And I mean, it could happen, but what I actually see happening is fracturing. Like thousands, probably in the future, millions of super tuned models that are purpose built for a specific use case and do exceptional work on that. I mean, two good examples that come to mind on this are Figure Robotics. They actually initially for their robotics humanoid robot were using OpenAI, and then they're like, no, actually, I don't need that burden. I can just focus my model and tune it and get it better and get better out and move faster. And so they severed that relationship with OpenAI, which is arguably one of the better. Like OpenAI is not like they're not chump. They're like right out there on the bleeding edge. Another example of specialization kind of winning out actually is Anthropic. Their LLM Claude is just they have just really leaned into this idea of we're going to optimize and specialize for code. They do well outside of code, mind you, but like they've really led into that. And they were, I think, the first big model to really understand that was a key strategic move. And even today, with all the advancements, they are right up there neck and neck with everyone else, and with a very modest budget, I might add. And so this, I think, this is what I see in Axiom. These agents you're using are using models that are tuned to their role and perform better because of it. Obviously, because I'm biased, I think it's better, but you have to try it, be the judge for yourself, try it out. But specialized models in AI agents, they're going to be with us. It's a huge part of the future long term. It's not going away.
Yeah.
And it's not a dig against the frontier labs. It's not like they're going, I mean, they're going to be needed for all kinds of things. I mean, let them solve cancer and energy and manufacturing and 100 other things. But this doesn't mean that like small tuned AI agents can't help the normal small business owner get an edge in their little area of the world. I mean, you don't have to be world changing to change the world in a meaningful way.
It really is I've heard it described this way a number of times, but like a wild west right now. I mean, there's so
Oh,
much
totally.
just open territory to go and kind of stake a claim and specialize and do things. I had a good friend a couple years ago. He's in the healthcare space, and I was describing. In fact, we were at an event. We were over in Malaysia a couple years back. He's like, Christian, you don't need to go and wait for the APIs to open up or whatever, like through Microsoft to do this or where it's like you can do this today yourself. Is like, I can show you. I've blogged about it. I will walk you through to go and do like a private a model with like a set of data that I want to have as a dedicated private. I don't want to share it out and I don't want this going into the consumer version of any AI platform. This IP says you could be up in like an hour with testing included, be live and be able to ask questions against the system. It's like it's not as complex as you think to go and build this to walk through because of what's already out there. But to your point about, I think that's where it's going. I think that fits into what like Satya Nadella shared about how these AI agents are going to replace SaaS because you're going to have agents that are specialized, but they'll become aware of their specialization and aware of like what the other agents in their vicinity, what they could connect with and go and do. And so you'll be able to, I use it. I know it's not a great way to describe, but it's more of a visual of the idea of a service bus model that has like a common language in between, and that you go and you ask it and it knows where to go and how to communicate between the different bots to do more and more complex things. Like I can see that future.
Oh, you know what? That's like that actually is like you've triggered something in my mind that I want to riff on there for a second. One of the like, again, back to like the principle, don't make humans do things computers do better. One of the things that you don't want a human, in my view, to do is be constantly having to decide, well, which model should I use? I mean, like right now, you go to
Right.
ChatGPT and you see like 17, like not 17, but like 7 models. And it's like, should I use O1? Should I use 4.5? I think
Right.
4.0 is pretty good. What about, like, it's all confused. And I know they're trying to make that better, but it's even if ChatGPT only had one model, the problem still persists. So, for example, if with Axiom on the back end, I'm choosing which model to use depending on the task, not just depending on the agent. Okay. And
Yeah.
so, without giving away any proprietary know-how on stuff, but like, for if it's a technical question, I'm going to use the best model for that. If it's a legal question, I'm going to use the best model for that. And I mean, right now there's a lot of evidence that shows OpenAI is the leader in legal in the US, but Grok 3 seems to very much be catching up in that area. So let me ask you this: you're a business owner. Do you have time to stay up to date with every new model and improve capacity out there? I mean, I'm swimming in this stuff. It's my business, and it's not easy to get, like, keep up with this stuff.
Yeah.
So Axiom just allows you to focus on the business outcomes that you need to do, and not have to constantly be switching between AI providers to get the best results. And that's part of what I manage, what I love. It's core to my business, but I don't think everyone needs to be doing that kind of thing. I think there's another thing that's like super salient, which is why I think Axiom performs better. And it's a kind of geeky, but so if you'll, but I think everyone will be able to understand this, because I think it's important. These AI models that back any AI agent, including Axiom's leadership team, they depend on context. Think about it as RAM, right? And
Mhm.
and it's a way to say to these models, you'll perform better if they remember who you are, what your business does, how you
Right.
think, that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And this area of memory, so called, is very much an area of active development. Cutting edge research is going on here. You actually do see the beginning of this with OpenAI's memory feature, where you're typing along and all of a sudden it's like, I just remembered this. And you can go in there and like delete them, I think is all you can do right
But
now.
also
But
that's, I mean, you, that's the reason why, like, I started a couple years back paying for the paid version, the plus version, to have it remember these and keep these ongoing conversations and threads. With the free tools, a lot of it's like it forgets every time you go in, refresh the
yeah, it's like
browser.
amnesia, like
Right.
immediate amnesia. You're like, what?
Right.
I just
Yeah.
had this amazing conversation. You can't remember it. Anyway,
Right.
it's just it's a part of the development of, like, Claude has projects where you can add project knowledge, and it gives the LLM some help, where you can give
Right.
some data and help them respond with more relevant responses. I do something similar with Axiom. When I onboard a new customer, we meet for 1 or 2 hours with the business leader, and I interview them about every aspect of their business. They kind of find it cathartic, because I'm like helping them, like, get this thing they've created all out of their system. But then I use that information to create business context that customizes the leadership team, those agents for which business, for that business, and it can be updated as information decays and so on. Anyway, what you see is that because of this context that is specific to the business, it performs better. With OpenAI, say it might remember something about you that you asked about some fact in the past discussion, but you really want that in your personal chat history to influence the business context. And like with Axiom, this is solved because everything is just business context only. I'm not trying to
Right.
solve every aspect of your life. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to help you run a successful business. There's none of that clutter. It's just super focused. And the net result is the outcomes are better. And from a privacy perspective, I just say, kind of a side note, but like, if you're using ChatGPT as a business owner, everything you put in ChatGPT, just read through the privacy policy. It's all getting trained on, it's all going
Yep.
into the cloud.
Right.
But if you use the APIs, which is what Axiom does on the back end, when I need something that, like, say, OpenAI uses, those APIs are governed by a totally different set of privacy policies,
Right.
which basically data goes in, it comes out, they commit to never train on it.
Yeah.
And
That. Yeah.
that's like, can be an important detail for a business owner.
That is a fundamental thing when, like, when I do training on AI. I mean, it's one of the things I go through and I talk about the ethics of AI. And then you also need to know just basics around fundamentals of how the technology works and the consumer versus dedicated or private versions of that and the tools and to what you're building there. It's like what I use out of the box. I'm a Microsoft MVP and RD. I'm using Copilot. I've got that in place. For
Mhm.
example, my co-author and I were writing a book. We have all of our notes, all the content. We do not want that out in a place where we're going to leverage and using for more editing,
Totally.
cleaning up and stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
we're not doing that out in the public space. We're doing that within a private, a Copilot environment where all of our IP remains internal. That's critical.
One
If
of my,
you're asking questions that are, you're going to go and search Google,
yeah.
you know, it's public information out there. That's perfect stuff to go and use and get ideas from the, you know, the Chat GPT interface.
Yeah, totally. I think I think my first VC funded startup was a fintech startup in a highly regulated space. And so like I'm sensitive to that, I guess, in my view, is like keeping everything contained, super secure, super private.
Yeah.
One thing that I will tell you, like it probably is worth
Everybody should anyway. Let me just point this out to the world. Like, I think that's we're sloppy here in the US. I've had a lot of international, a lot of European customers and partners that I've worked with where they're a lot more conscientious of data. It's not just PII, the things that you think of around keep it secure in the US, that there are laws around, but they're very secure with, you know, emails and names and phone numbers and other things that could be public information, publicly accessible, but they're still very careful with discussions and where's the data, you know, the data residency, all those things, where again, we're a bit sloppy in the
yeah, a
US.
little cavalier sometimes. Totally agree.
Cavalier is a good word for it. Yep.
I think one thing that's really interesting about this AI leadership team is how this multi I'll tell a couple anecdotes. This like multi-perspective intelligence enhances clarity, it mitigates risk, and it actually optimizes for your cognitive bandwidth. So let me tell you a story about that. I had it's just really helpful to pressure test your ideas from every angle of the business before you actually move. And like for entrepreneurs, time is a luxury, and Axiom allows you to ensure your decision making happens with speed, precision, and confidence, and without the constraints of a human advisor or peer group. Because whenever you're engaging with someone else, you've got a schedule, you've got time constraints, and sometimes, I mean, I could just tell you, as a small business owner, I'm waking up at 2 a.m. mind on fire. What am I going to do about this thing? And just having that strategic partner that supports and challenges, refines leadership instincts that enable high stakes decision, it just really matters. And I will just say, especially for the smaller businesses, at the larger size of a business, let's say plus 50 mil in annual revenue, like there's actually a lot of tolerance for error. There just is built into the system. You reach this critical mass, you've got revenue coming in, things just don't move but when you've got a small business, and my kind of like sweet spot is kind of in the 1 to 5 million revenue. I do help larger than that and also smaller than that, but that's kind of the core where the problem is most acute that I'm solving. And that's actually, if someone breaks out of like 10 million in revenue, they've kind of achieved escape velocity. Like they're probably not going to be the statistic that dies after 10 years, but it's in that smaller range. Anyway, so I was working with one of my customers, and this is the story I'll tell you. So he's working on a plan for a new app, and Ben, who's the chief product officer, he's having this whole discussion, and he's he's a dev at heart. He wants to, but he doesn't feel very confident in the marketing and sales side. This like softer skills, let's call them. Anyway, Ben responds in this conversation, and he sent me a screenshot. I'll read it to you. Ben responds, "I have nothing to add." Those of you who have worked with hallucination and tried to like stop, like getting a model to recognize when to shut up is like really hard. So I was like super proud of this. But he's like, "I have nothing to add. The previous messages have provided a thorough breakdown of strategies, challenges, and actionable steps for your app. Every critical aspect from monetization to retention to pre-launch marketing and user acquisition have been addressed with depth. I fully agree that at this stage, implementation and testing are key. The focus should now shift from planning to execution. As you have clear prioritized actions to move forward, if you encounter roadblocks during implementation or need help interpreting early results, feel free to circle back for guidance. We are set up for a strong start. Now it's time to take action." Like that was the quote, and that was just like, that's exactly the clarity and support that this, entrepreneur needed. to like, okay, I need to like stop thinking about it and like just get to testing.
Dude, I need to ask you on this topic of like the personality and the insights that you get from it. Like when I went and built my first chat bot and things using the Microsoft Power Platform, I went through it. I knew parts of it, like the SharePoint, like the back end side of it, setting that up easy. I've done that hundreds of times kind of thing. But to go in and build this and then put the logic in. I was working with a company, a training company, Collab365 out of the UK. Friends of mine that did that. I did a week-long course and went and built it.
Uh-huh.
I did like a quick like vacation request form in Teams, like super simple, basic thing. But I was really surprised at how quickly, like I could put I would be like, hey, in this chat with this agent, be like, hey, I need to get out of here for a while. That I did not train it on that phrasing. It went and it translated that as you're looking to do like time off kind of thing. Like I was amazed at how I did intentional typos and other things that would pick that up, but it understood from the context of the space, around those things, added it into a few different conversations in a few different places, and it would pick up on that stuff right away. Hey, like, hey, is this something you're looking for? Like officially request the time off or whatever, uh, you know, but the personality aspect of this, like I realize that is something that some of the AI developers are thinking a lot about. We were talking about last week's, like some of my background working with, over the years, going through leadership development training using like the Myers-Briggs based data, which is go
Yeah,
back
yeah, yeah.
decades of data around that. Is that how does that fit in, or was that part of your thinking and shaping how these bots react, how they work with the individual? Because there's
Yeah,
definitely personality there.
no, totally. I will tell you that there is actually different personalities. I'm not using Myers-Briggs as a like input into that system. I'm not doing that, but I definitely want like um like Kate. Kate's the chief marketing officer. I want her to be creative, like really creative. And so I've tuned her in that direction, and I think it's on the flip side, Ryan, who's the chief legal officer, I kind of want him to be a little bit more reserved, like
Yeah. Yep.
let's talk about preserving risk, and that kind of thing. So, I'm not sure. I'm not going to say that they're perfect, but they're really good. I mean, the way I think about it is this: if you take the spectrum of business leader entrepreneurs, let's just say entrepreneurs out there, and like this entrepreneur is really good at running a, or sorry, really good at running a business, really bad. Like and if you there's going to be a distribution, normal distribution against all of those. And what's happened is the AI has advanced so rapidly over the last, I will say, 6 months, that my opinion is that these AI agents in Axiom are better than half of the humans out there. What that means, practically speaking, is that the humans would make a mistake in this area of the curve, but the AI wouldn't. And so if you've got a human that's supported with this AI team, you may still make mistakes, but you'll make them in this area of the curve, the smaller, and you just protect yourself from being in that space in the curve. And for business owners, like I said, most small business owners don't start because they're like, MBA super psyched about like business. That's like not where that is just not the pattern. The pattern is they are by definition not good at business. And so having an AI team that helps them make business decisions better than half or even more depending on their little niche in the world, like it's just massively transformative, and it means that they can figure out things that they could never figure out before, and they make their business more successful and achieve those aims they were out to achieve in the first place.
But how does Axiom respond when you have, and this is a very common scenario, all different sides
Mhm.
of the business, where there's a decision that has to be made, where it's basically, like how do you balance between short-term urgency with really the long-term strategic impact or the considerations around that?
Well, that's one of the things. Yeah, that's sorry, I cut you off there.
Yeah, no, that was the end. Yeah.
I think that's where Axiom really shines because it has no problem doing something really, really tactical in nature, really short term, and then also immediately flipping into something super long term. Now, ultimately, the business, like, look, this, even though I've got these names and I try to make them human because it's better to interact with them that way. Like they're not trying to replace you. I mean, there's a lot of people that think AI is going to replace everyone. I just am not one of those people. I, what I do believe is that AI can really, really help humans think through stuff in a really effective way. And so if I, the human is ultimately in control, right? The human has to make the
Until
decision.
we're not, yes, and that's why I say please and thank you to the AI
That's
too,
right.
so they
You should
know
definitely.
when they do take over, they know that I was I was
That's
kind.
right. I was gentle. Well, and also you're training them, so train them to be nice and not
Right.
jerks, right? So
Yeah,
like,
of course,
but
yeah.
but anyway, I think that's the challenge is that they're going to help. They're going to help you uncover the breadth and depth of issues really fast. I'll tell you another anecdote. So I was working with every time I do a sales call, I ask them, I demo the app and I bring it up, and I say, tell me what is the most pressing business challenge that you're working on right now? What is it? And then I type it into Axiom. I said, let's just throw it out to the team and have a discussion. So I did that with this one executive, and he was dealing with a staffing issue that he had, by the way, been working for 2 months on, and he's just been wasting money for these last 2 months. And he got so involved in this. I'm like typing, and he's talking and reading, and it's like I'm just like intermediate. For 20 minutes, he does this big long conversation, and at the end of that conversation, he's like, "Dang, I know what to do." I said, well, how confident do you feel about how you should proceed? He's like, I'm 100% confident. I'm like, why do you think that is? And he said, because we explored every aspect of this problem. We left no stone unturned. And can you send me the transcript? And I'm
Yeah.
like, sure. Like, I hope that everyone, like at a minimum, I want every business to succeed. And so, when someone meets with me, I try to help them at least with one thing as they're going through the demo. But I think what's magical is that I think about it as decision velocity is that it's cognitively demanding, but it's focused. And so you get through everything really quick, and then you come to a place where you're just like really confident. And that is freeing for an executive where everything you do as a CEO or as an entrepreneur is you're swimming in ambiguity. And so the value of coming to a place where you're like, you know what? Given all this ambiguity, I feel really confident that this is the way to move forward. And that's just really helpful. And I think it results in better business outcomes.
Well, I do a couple questions, or last questions for you. Like one,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know that I mean, you and I both run into people. I know you were sharing previously about former chairman that you worked with as a CEO that was kind of dead set against AI, and there's people that are not just the AI, because there's certainly the crowd that believes they're going to take over, run everything, and humans will live in luxury behind. Like, okay, you don't know humans
Yeah.
well, and like that
Yeah.
won't happen. No, but that are dead set against that. From an ethical standpoint, do you think there's any downside, any issues if leaders are becoming, overly reliant on AI to handle a lot of these sensitive situations? Is it weakening muscles that should be strengthened?
You know what? I can speak from my own experience. Just to be clear, um, these models only got good enough to be a thinking party in this, like in the last like 5 to 6 months. And I built this for me because I was like, I need this. And see, the human. So I think the answer is no, and I'll tell you why. If you engage with this kind of a conversation, it is pushing your neurons hard. Like you are being forced to explore. Oh my goodness! Like when you start a discussion, very often this happens. I'll start a discussion, and first agent responds, and you read it, and you're like, "Yeah, motherhood and apple pie. I know those things. I love those things. No one's gonna like freak out about those. Like everyone's fine." But as the discussion as you engage with the discussion, and they will ask you questions because they're trained to be Socratic in nature and teachers. And so they're like, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? As that goes on, invariably, one thing happens. You're like, dang, that is new. And I didn't have that on my working set. That's a great idea. And so I think it's both helpful and instructive. One of the part of like embedded in your question, honestly, is this idea that like limitations of the human. I'll think about it this way. Like I, one of my customers actually uses Axiom. He's an executive coach and he uses Axiom with his clients that he coaches. Okay. So, and traditional executive coaches rely on intuition, past experience, pattern recognition, and that's good. And they're really good. I don't want to like say that humans don't have a place because I really, really do think they do. I found that Axiom pairs great with the human coaches, but
Mhm.
Axiom, in contrast, it's leveraging AI-driven pattern recognition, data synthesis, multi-perspective analysis. It's a form of intelligence that's beyond what a single human
Of
can
course. Right.
provide in
Yeah.
their brain. Like each Axiom agent has the whole of the business context in their short-term memory every time you talk to them. And that is something extremely difficult for most humans embedded full time with their company, let alone asking a coach that's managing multiple businesses. It's just too much to ask of the human. And I think that I think that plays into the idea that I don't think it's going to weaken human capability. What I think it will do is strengthen their capability. It just and I use it like that, and it's just really. I will tell you, it's really like you always have this question as a business leader. What am I forgetting? Like what's going to come out of nowhere and just like totally break this all down.
Yeah.
And when you have these agents, which increasingly have basically infinite context memory, like it's really actually a humbling but supportive feeling where you're like, okay, I'm probably not missing anything. I really do think I've got everything at play here. I can make a good decision as a business leader.
Well, that's a lot of what the way that again, when I've trained people on AI is to talk about, it's like, look, it's one, you need to go back and validate. And there's different prompts for validating the responses and
Yeah,
making
yeah,
sure
yeah.
that you can write right there based on your knowledge, your understanding. But it's like an idea generation stuff. You just can't cut and paste. You have to go back and look through and often I'll get suggestions back. I'm like, no, no, no. Oh, like, oh, I didn't think of that one, and I'll go add that into my outline and expand on it and share my own thoughts. And again, it's a tool, it's a way to leverage, to do more, to access parts of my memory, my experience, like around there, or get me thinking of new things to go and then further research on to better understand before I then, put my name behind that thing. But
You know,
it's a and that's why I just keep saying the same thing. I said why I think Microsoft's branding of Copilot was brilliant. It's not
totally,
the pilot, it's the Copilot. It
totally
doesn't
brilliant.
replace the
Yes.
human, it's
When
a help for the human.
Yeah, and when I saw that come out, I'm like, dang, that's such a great name. And
Yeah.
obviously, but
Well, they need
obviously,
one every 25 years, a good
I
good
was just gonna
brand.
say,
I
having
know.
worked at Microsoft, I'm just like, we just suck at naming. Naming is
Yes.
hard anyway. But
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like that's really true. I think you can. I just think, look, I remember I was I showed this to an executive friend of mine. We'd grown up together in Redmond, and he's done like some business. He's now leading a huge business, and he's done it for all his life, right? And I showed it to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I think I'm better than this." Like honestly, he's like, "I think I bet," and I think just knowing what I know about the system and whatever, I think he is. He's like in that part of the curve where he is actually better. Now, AI is getting better too, but what he said to me was really interesting is he said, but I've got a bunch of managers who could really use this support,
Yeah.
so we're going down that path. But
Yeah.
like it's I just think it's I feel like it's like, it's insanity for, and obviously I'm biased here, but I just really think it's true, is that you need to, just like the computer was a bicycle for the mind, AI is like a motorcycle for the mind. Like it's a step function in terms of input versus distance output. Like it's totally different. And so if you don't avail yourself of that, you can keep riding your little tricycle or whatever, but it's not going to. You're not going to be able to compete. So to me, I'm just like, it's just something you've got to do as a business leader, and I think Axiom is a great way to do it.
One thing I know that kind of my last question for you,
Okay.
think about like the future of this. I mean, I just can't. As somebody who participates, as we all do these days, in a lot of online meetings, so a lot of Teams based and other tools and platforms too. And my thought would be, if this were listening and running in real time alongside that, and then you know chip into the conversation, add in thoughts, be like, like it recognize, the different voices coming through the various connections, but then to be able to, maybe it raises its hand and be like, oh, the CEO bot has something to say, click on it, and then you can add, the audio to it. But I mean, it's not much of a leap to then have it participating in conversations in real time and adding into those discussions as a valued member of the leadership team.
I think that's inevitable. Something like that. I don't know what like actual like how it manifests itself product wise, but I do believe that. But you still have the same what I'll call organization or team dynamics where people have to feel safe. They have to feel like they can execute. Like I had one large American company that I got a referral to, and I was meeting with. This is like a $300 million company. I was talking to him about this, and he made the comment to me. He's like, can I like just put this up on the screen and we project it and then like in the executive team do it? I'm like, yeah, of course you can do whatever you want with it. Like I'm happy for you to do whatever. But when you see an AI agent that responds in that frame and someone else sees their title on that screen and that output is like vastly superior to what they think they can, like you're going to have challenges there.
Yeah.
And so you got to be delicate with the reality of where your team is and how confident they feel about um, how you feel about their input. Like humans provide so much more than like raw intellectual horsepower, which is like probably the Microsoft term of like what these bots or these LLMs provide right now. There's emotion, there's empathy, there's ethics, there's just all these things that are distinctly humans. I think, these LLMs are going to try to attempt, and I wish them luck, but it's just complicated. Humans are complicated. These squishy bags of water, we are. And so like, I think there's always going to be an opportunity for the human to really add value and really help. What I think about, I just think there should be more businesses in the world. I think businesses solve problems. The more businesses, the more solved problems we have. And if we can have those businesses be more successful, then I just think there's going to be more goodness put out into the world. And I think AI can help do that in a way that's, like I say, distinct. Just like the computer was a distinct kind of like, whoa, that was a huge step. I mean, you remember when the Mac came out, like these things were massive in their impact. And I think the same thing is we're in that kind of era right now with AI, and to not like grasp it in all of its potential and high flux environment that we're in, like really make good of that. And I think you can preserve an edge in a highly competitive space.
Yeah, I'm excited by the direction for this. It's going to be fascinating to see how, as this technology, advances faster and faster. There's more things that are coming. Like from a productivity standpoint, like the tools that we rely on daily today could look very different in 2, 3 to 5 years. So I think the incorporation of these kinds of tools, I think we're going to see it get more and more integrated. So it's less of a, hey, typing interface. I think it will be just you're talking to it like the two of us are chatting. I know you can do that now. It can do voice to text and those kind of things. But
I will tell you, just on that point in particular, yeah, the technology exists for that, and I actually looked into that. But what I found in my testing, this may change in the future, because there's a bit of an uncanny valley in terms of delays. Comes down to microseconds. Maybe it's just not quite right. But at the current level, like what you can get through an API call to say OpenAI or whatever, which is very easy to integrate. What I noticed is that when you make a business leader type, it's almost like it goes through a different set of neurons in their brain, and the output is better. And as you know, with these LLMs, input, garbage in, garbage out. The better the input, I do everything I can to like make the input, to take small things and really make it good so that the team can respond well. But the bottom line is when you have a business leader that takes the time to type their thoughts out, it creates a kind of rigor and a focus that results in better input to the team, and that results in better thought and better outputs. So for now, even though like it's technically possible and it's like not, it's like I think the typing is actually an advantage for this specific use case. It may not be for every use case, but for this use case where the business leader, the entrepreneur's main product is their thinking. You
Right.
want to do things that will enhance their thinking as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, David, really appreciate you taking the time to share more about what Axiom's doing. Of course, I'll have a link in the blog post and out on the YouTube as well as the podcast. So you'll be able to find that. Click on and find Axiom.Industries out and get more information if you want to take a look at that. So, David, really appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you so much, Christian. We'll talk to you soon.
You've been listening to the CollabTalk Podcast. New episodes are published weekly, and you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and most other podcast platforms. Thanks for listening.